Former Secretary of State Colin Powell is in the news today against his will for his private thoughts of the presidential candidates revealed in personal emails leaked online by hackers. In a 2014 email exchange, he says of Hillary Clinton, "I would rather not have to vote for her, although she's a friend I respect. A 70-year person with a long track record, unbridled ambition, greedy, not transformational." He goes on to cite a tabloid report on Bill Clinton's sex life. Powell is far more withering about Donald Trump, who he calls a national disgrace and an international pariah. In multiple emails, he comments on Trump's leadership of the birther movement, calling it racist, writing in one, quoting, quote, "There is nothing he can say that will sway black voters. He takes us for idiots. He can never overcome what he tried to do to Obama with his search for the birth certificate, hoping to force Obama out of the presidency." A senior U.S. intelligence official tells NBC News the site where the emails were posted, dcleaks.com, not affiliated with WikiLeaks, is believed to be a conduit for Russian intelligence. This is just the latest trove of hacked emails to disrupt the presidential race. There were those internal DNC emails released just before the Democratic convention, which revealed institutional bias against Bernie Sanders and led to the ouster of party chairwoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz. That leak was claimed by a hacker who goes by the moniker Guccifer 2.0, widely believed to have been made up by the Russian government in an attempt to cover up their own hack. Just yesterday, that same hacker released more DNC documents, including one containing what appears to be the personal cell phone number for vice presidential candidate Tim Kaine. According to a memo obtained by Politico, hackers are also targeting state Democratic Party officials and have successfully breached and impersonated some of them. Interim DNC Chair Donna Brazile did not mince words when of who she holds responsible. Quote, "The DNC is the victim of a crime, an illegal cyber attack by Russian state-sponsored agents who seek to harm the Democratic Party and progressive groups in an effort to influence the presidential election. There's one person who stands to benefit from these criminal acts, and that is Donald Trump." It's not just the Democratic Party and other public officials being targeted. Not long after Russian athletes were barred from the Rio Olympics for doping, Russian hackers posted what they say are the drug testing records of gymnast Simone Biles and tennis star Serena Williams. Joined now by Malcolm Nance, 35-year career naval intelligence officer, now an MSNBC terrorism analyst. So here's my question, Malcolm. I find it as a non-expert citizen making sense of the news. You've got people saying this was the Russians, this was the Russians. I don't know. Why is that not jumping to conclusions that are not supported by the evidence? Convince me that there is a reason to think this is a concentrated effort by the Russians to essentially impact the U.S. election.
Well, there's a lot of evidence. And as a matter of fact, you don't have to believe just what one or two people say. Virtually all of the top cybersecurity companies in the United States, CrowdStrike, Mandiant, others, have been studying these groups and have been watching the fingerprints of two very large groups. Richard Engel spoke about them a little earlier. There's actually three wings to this hacking world from the Russians. There's Russian intelligence, which operates two different hacking groups. I'll use the simplified names, Cozy Bear and Fancy Bear. Then you have cyber criminals who are also involved in these hackings. We call them cyber criminal bears. And then there are these militia, these freewheeling pro-Russian people who do hackings. We call them militia bears. These three bear wings all have had fingerprints at one time or another. But ATP-28 and ATP-29, which is advanced persistent threat, which are actually these packages of data that are left behind by the two Soviet agencies, the FSB, formerly known as the KGB, and the GRU. Their fingerprints have been over hacks all throughout the world. We've identified them in Estonia when they took down part of the Estonian internet system. Georgia, the Ukraine, German intelligence identified them as hacking the the German parliament. We've even seen them do false flag attacks pretending that they were ISIS's cyber caliphate army. ATP-28 and 29, these two Russian intelligence agency hacking packages are very well known, and their fingerprints were all over every aspect of the DNC, DCCC, the Hillary Clinton campaign, Colin Powell's. WikiLeaks appears to be their conduit for getting information out, and Guccifer 2.0 and this other group, DC Leaks, are just fronts for this intelligence operation.
All right, so then what does this mean? I mean, I find it like I don't even know who's doing it. When I think about Colin Powell, who is a public figure but also a private citizen, when I think about Simone Biles' medical records being hacked. It's just profoundly unsettling to me, the idea of this sort of dystopian future we're entering into, of all this information being essentially in the hands of Lord knows who for whatever purposes.
Well, what's actually happening here is a very large-scale strategic political warfare operation against the United States that's being carried out by Russia. And Russia, you know, after the fall of the Soviet Union, the one agency that never changed was the KGB. They just changed their initials from FSB, you know, FSK, then to FSB, and they were led by the spy master in chief who is actually running Russia right now, Vladimir Putin, former director of the KGB. These operations are an integral part in their political process, and they've carried out operations through, throughout Eastern Europe called compromat, where they try to compromise political groups and individuals either through blackmail or through operations. And in this term of an operation, they are trying to put their scale on the thumb. Not really. They're actually putting their hand on the thumb, and they want an outcome for one person in this election, and that's Donald Trump.
All right, Malcolm Nance, thanks for your time tonight. Appreciate it.
More from the foreign policy side. The Chinese government says it's going to return a U.S. Navy drone seized from international waters in the South China Sea. But the president-elect says we don't want it. Now, you'll remember Mr. Trump blasted the seizure at first, calling it unprecedented on Twitter. But last night he changed his tune and tweeted out this: "We should tell China that we don't want the drone they stole back. Let them keep it." Some critics warn this tweet could further strain U.S.-China relations, already delicate following Mr. Trump's controversial phone call with Taiwan's president. For more on the president-elect's, shall we call it, Twitter diplomacy, let's bring in our panel, radio talk show host Ethan Berman and radio show host Mark Levine. Gentlemen, thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Mark, first
Thanks,
to you.
Leland.
Actually, I'll pose this to both of you guys. Do either of you understand these two tweets, one calling it unprecedented and being so angry, and the next one telling the Chinese to keep the drone?
I don't know what caused Donald Trump to flip-flop. Maybe he owes massive debts to the Chinese, and they promised to call them in. Remember, he won't tell us what debts he owes to China and to Russia. He won't disclose that information, so we really don't know who's pulling the strings of our president-elect.
Well, I didn't think we were going to all get there so quickly. Ethan, does this make sense to you, or are you scratching your head as well?
It's schizophrenic in terms of he's going one way then the other. And by the way, in terms of diplomacy, the stream of consciousness tweeting is exceptionally dangerous. Go back 100 years to the beginning of World War I, less things have started wars.
Now, Ethan, just in fairness, I did hear a couple folks earlier today defending Mr. Trump here, saying essentially that by saying, hey, keep the drone, no problem, maybe upping the ante a little bit, because when he becomes president and he wants to do something to China, maybe steal one of their drones or steal one of their stealth aircraft or something like that, he can say, well, you took our drone, we're going to take this in return. Is there some power in saying, never mind, we'll see on the playground?
The only power in the way that he approached this is keeping him, unstable. We don't know which way that he's going to be coming at us. This kind of unstable diplomacy I find to be deeply disconcerting. And I guess if that's your approach, is so they never know what's coming next. But that is a very dangerous way to approach diplomacy. This is why we haven't.
Somebody else
That's why we don't do it that way.
Somebody else who doesn't know what's coming next is James Woolsey, who's former director of the CIA and a Trump advisor. Take a listen to him this morning.
Then Donald Trump tweets, keep the drone. What's going on there?
I don't know. I can't keep up with tweets. I don't do the social media myself, so who knows?
Okay, you better start reading those Donald Trump tweets.
All right, so is this the new reality, Mark, that Twitter diplomacy, never mind all the diplomatic cables and ambassadors and everything else, just set up a Twitter alert?
This is not a game. This is not a joke. The presidency is not some kind of reality show. I want to praise Ethan. It's nice to see right and left agreeing and coming together and being Americans first. We have to protect American security. China and Russia are our biggest enemies. And when Vladimir Putin chooses our president of the United States, puts his thumb on the scales, does the greatest espionage attack in American history certainly since September 11th, this is something that should wake up everyone. I'm really glad to see, for example, Donald Trump finally recognize but his instincts were to say that Vladimir Putin is telling the truth and our military and our intelligence were lying. That's not the instincts we want in the President of the United States.
Ethan, I'm going to let you respond to that quickly, and then we're going to move on.
Yeah, glad that Mark and I agree on this pretty heavily. Yeah, the Russians attacked us, the Chinese are attacking us, and Donald Trump is defending the people attacking us. That is not what I want from a president. And by the way, this whole idea of a Twitter diplomacy, the only good news is we won't need a WikiLeaks dump to find out about the secret cables.
Well, when it's all right out there, I guess you have a point there. Quickly, guys, we're going to get to Mr. Trump's cabinet. Heard from Phil Keating that he was finishing up the last 2 appointments, possibly today, possibly early this week, maybe before Christmas. The 2 appointments left are Agriculture Secretary and then also the Secretary of the Veteran Affairs Administration. Ethan, first to you. You've been unquestionably hard on Mr. Trump, whether it's in this segment or before. How do you feel about his cabinet now?
Well, I mean, look, I'm going to say General Mattis, there's an unquestionably the best choice possible. We've got Energy Secretary. I question deeply. Rick Perry has a terrible track record as a crony capitalist when he was governor of Texas. I mean, look, agriculture, the Republicans have attacked the ag bill and the way we subsidize things like food stamps. I also have attacked the way that we subsidize big ag. Maybe, just maybe, we can come together and say we can reform both of those programs.
I don't know. Conceivably, somebody like Betsy DeVos, though, you can't really take issue with, do you?
Well, I mean, undermining public education and saying we need to exclusively move to a voucher system when we need to move away from public education, publicly funded education, I do find disconcerting because the poorest neighborhoods, those who aren't able to speak for themselves as well as those of us who are doing better in life, I'm concerned about them getting a lesser education. So, yeah, no, I am concerned about her as education secretary.
All right, Ethan. Mark, you heard Ethan. I think he only had one name that he was okay with. Can you give more than one name, or are you just going to go for 0?
I'm not completely offended by the United Nations ambassador, but let's.
And you're offended. You're offended by General Mattis?
I'm offended by Michael Lewis. I'm offended by Steve Bannon. I mean, to have the Secretary of Innuendo, a guy who promotes Lenin, who promotes Leninist strategies and promotes white nationalism as his Secretary of Innuendo, putting forth propaganda.
Secretary of Innuendo, come on, Mark. Really, come on. Let's have, if you want to have a serious conversation, let's have a serious conversation.
Well, let's have a serious conversation, because this is a guy who's promoted post-fact society. He's promoted fake news. And Mike Lewis put forward this idea that Hillary Clinton was involved in a sex ring. You know that's true, Leland. No, wait, Leland, you know it's true. Let's
Mark.
You know that Michael Lewis put forward. No, wait. This isn't the Washington Post and the New York Times. He put forward that Hillary Clinton was involved in a child sex ring. There are reasons why some mentally ill man in North Carolina came to D.C. and tried to shoot up a pizza place.
Then there's a lot of reasons. Perhaps the number one reason was that he was mentally ill. Mark and Ethan, thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Leland.
You know, whenever you have radio talk show hosts on, they always make it interesting. And keep it right here for more interesting conversation after our show, Fox News Sunday. Chris Wallace has an exclusive